Oh my gosh. I've been doing it wrong the whole time. If you're new here, my name is Nathan Mueller, and this is Outdoor Auto, where we build and break, test and teach just about everything we can find related to outdoor automotive. Okay, in today's video, we are going to be covering off-road communications, and specifically, we're going to be talking about GMRS radios that kind of look like this, if you've ever seen one of those. And then more specifically, we are going to be talking about antennas, because it turns out I've been doing antennas wrong this whole time. Antennas have always been a little bit of an afterthought for me. Basically, I would just buy the biggest, baddest radio that I could find that had high wattage, and then I would pair it with the highest decibel antenna that I could find on the market. Yeah, some of you are already shaking your head at me, and I can feel it through this screen. I've been using this 6 decibel antenna from Midland for quite a while. I know I'm going to get questions. This is a Nagoya mount. You're probably going to notice that there's a lot of Midland products in this video. I'm not sponsored by Midland and they don't pay me any money to review their product, but Midland did partner with us in Baja in Mexico to set up a brand new repeater tower that kind of covered an area that was a little bit of a dead zone. It's awesome for safety. It's open to the public. You can use it if you ever go down to Baja. And through that partnership, we kind of became friends and we've been able to test a lot of their products pre-release. It was actually Midland's new release of antennas that clued me in that I had been doing something wrong for quite a while. So this antenna has actually worked pretty well for me, but the problem that I run into is my Tundra is really wide. In fact, it's wider than a Raptor. And a lot of times I find myself chasing Jeeps down Jeep trails. And what I've been running into all these years is these little thin antennas get broken off. It's not really the fault of the antenna. This one even has like, you know, a spring to make it super flexible. So when Midland announced that they were coming out with bull bar antennas, I got pretty excited. Bull bar antennas are those super thick antennas that most people mount on their front bumper. They've been using these in Australia for many, many years, and for some reason they just really haven't been available in the US market. If you ever notice a trend in Australia that's really popular over there with overlanding, more than likely that trend is going to come here to the United States. We seem to be a couple of years behind on a lot of stuff, and I don't know, maybe that's because like overlanding was basically invented over there, but they seem to get things dialed in and they seem to be right about most things. This one is a 6 decibel gain antenna. So I looked at the ones that they had coming out, and they had one that was a couple that were 3 decibels. They had one that was 6.6, and then they have another one that was 7.5. So I got really excited. I was like, this is awesome. I can get a stronger antenna as far as the thickness of it and not getting broke in the bushes. And then I can also get a stronger antenna as far as the amount of decibel gain that the antenna is capable of putting out. Now, when I started playing around with these antennas was when I started to learn a little bit more information around how decibel gain works, and it doesn't work the way that I thought it did.
Okay, so it turns out that lower decibels cast a taller signal, making communication clear when encountering heavily obstructed areas such as cities, dense forests, and mountains. Higher decibel gain casts a very long signal, better fit for areas with minimum obstructions like wide open plains or highways. If you have a lot of obstructions, these high decibel antennas really aren't going to do you a ton of good.
So I actually spend the majority of my time off-roading mountain trails in Idaho, so I would have been better suited with a 3 decibel antenna, but that's not the only mistake that I made.
And yes, we have hats now, so if you're in the market, check them out. These are high-quality Richardson 7-panel hats sporting an Outdoor Auto patch that has a not-so-subtle tribute to vintage Toyota racing colors in the design.
Okay, so let's take a look at some of these antennas, and then I'm going to walk you through some of the mistakes that I was making when I was installing my antennas. It turns out I was doing that wrong, and that kind of defeats the purpose of having a good antenna as well. Okay, so right here is a typical antenna that you would see that would actually come with the radio when you buy it. A lot of times these are anywhere from like 0.5 to 1 dB of gain. Sometimes you get lucky and you can get one that's close to 2. This is that 6 dB antenna that I was talking about that I had on my truck that I do break occasionally. You can tell it's basically barely any thicker than this tiny little guy right here. This is a bull bar antenna. So side-by-side comparison, you get the idea. These things are huge and beefy. They have those huge springs on the end. If you want to see one installed, this is what it looks like. I've got it mounted to the bumper. And this is a 3 dB gain one, so it's the short stubby, it's very strong, and as you can see, it has flex, like it'll bend. So you've got a lot of give there. I think it's going to be pretty hard to break that. You can unscrew it right here. It has a little set screw. It's actually sitting right here. So I could actually take this off and swap this out with this other antenna. This is the new 6.6 dB gain antenna, bull bar antenna. This is about twice as long as the 3, as you can see. It's pretty huge. And then we go to the very next one, which is the 7.5 dB gain antenna. So this thing is massive. It doesn't even have the mounting spring on here. It is 4 feet long. So if you mounted this 4 feet off the ground, say on your spare tire on the back of your car, this could actually qualify as a sand flag, like in sand dunes, because you just need to be 8 feet off the ground. So this thing is massive. Keep in mind, these are mostly all coming with all the cabling that you need. A lot of antennas are sold with all that stuff separately, and these cables and like these huge mounting springs, and see, it even has the screws to secure it. So like I didn't even have to buy a bracket to mount that right there. It was able to just go straight on into a hole that was already pre-drilled that I had in the bumper. So yeah, just factor that in when you're thinking of the cost of antennas, whether you have the mounting hardware or not. So lots of mounting options are available. But when I was looking into mounting options was when I found out that there was additional things that I was doing wrong with how I've installed my antenna, because on Midland's webpage they have a lot of tips for how to install an antenna and get the least amount of interference from other things. So for example, there's the obvious stuff like install your antenna as high as possible, but don't install it above your roof line. They have simple stuff like don't install the fiberglass tall lip antenna on a lip mount because those are not strong enough to actually support it. One of the other pieces of advice that they gave was the best place to get your antenna cable into your cab is to go through the actual firewall. Now you're usually going to have some kind of little rubber grommet where you can actually drill a hole or pass it through there. The reason for this is a lot of people try to run them in through their doors and just close it in their door again and again and again, and these are actually semi-complex cables and you're just going to do a lot of damage if you do that. Another thing with the cable, this is one of those things that I was doing wrong, is these cables are pretty long. So when you have extra cable, what you don't want to do is you don't want to wind it up into one big coil and just stick it underneath your carpet that way. That actually has a propensity to cause interference and feedback. So in a worst case scenario, you can actually cut these cables, and if you can actually get the proper crimping mechanism to be able to shorten a cable. I believe it's called PL259. Let me look. Yes, PL259 male crimp. If you get one of those online, you can actually crimp these cables and make them whatever length you want. But yeah, winding up the cable, you shouldn't be doing that. I was doing that, so it'll be interesting to see if I can get a lot clearer connection once I have all this done correctly. So this is going to be a little bit of a controversial one. Antennas are supposed to be grounded. So one of the things that they advise you to do is when you install this antenna, they advise you to install it on bare metal. But the problem with that is, of course, that's going to leave an area for rust to start to form. And with this one in particular, I actually had to drill out the hole a tiny bit wider to be able to connect this. So technically it's fairly well grounded right now, but also I would be a little bit worried about rust. I think that might be one of the nice things of using one of their brackets to install instead of just putting it straight into your bumper. Because then in a worst case scenario, a bracket gets a little bit rusted and you don't have to worry about your actual car rusting. Okay, this is one that I did actually know. When you install your antenna, you want to keep it away from high powered other electrical items. So you don't want to put this right in front of a light bar or right next to your ignition cables or high powered cables. You're just asking for interference at that point. If you do have problems with interference from your cabling, you can attach these things called ferrite core beads to the cables. If you look them up online, they're really cheap. They're like 25 to 75 cents. You've seen them before on like computer cables. A lot of times it'll be a little ball that's on the end of the cable. So those can also help you with solving interference issues if it's just impossible to route your cable around all the electrical and all your high-powered lights. Okay, so if after you fix all of your wiring and all of your cabling for your antennas, you still have a hard time hearing your radio clearly, Midland does make these brand new amplified speakers, but the crazy thing is they make ones that are amplified that actually have noise canceling now. So that's brand new. Never seen that before. We will be giving one of those away on our Patreon, as well as one of these. In fact, we've got a lot of gear saved up to give away on Patreon. So if you haven't checked that out, check it out. There are free videos over there as well. There's Patreon only videos. But there's a lot of stuff going on over there, and definitely some giveaways of some very good gear. So the last thing that, of course, I've done wrong many, many times is, even though I knew that you're not supposed to have your antenna right next to something high-powered, I tend to not pay too much attention when I route the cable back. And I've noticed on 2 of my trucks, I have my antenna cable routed very close to some of my battery cables. And again, you're just asking for interference when that happens. So ideally, you want to try to route your cable away from all the power cables that are under your hood, especially the higher amperage ones that are connected directly to your battery. Okay, so I'm curious if any of you guys were making any of the same mistakes that I was making. I'm pretty excited to actually swap out my 6 dB of gain antenna and try out this 3 dB bull bar antenna up in the mountains in Idaho to see if we can get some more coverage out of it. I'm also excited that this is easy to remove right here with the set screw, because when I do go down to Baja, you better believe I'm going to stick that giant whip 7.5 dB antenna on there and have some fun testing the limits of how far we can talk. I hope this was helpful. Sometimes the best way to teach other people is to tell them about the mistakes that you make yourself. I hope you find that enjoyable. Please enjoy a laugh at my expense, and talk to you guys next week. New videos every Sunday.